So we are joined right now by Sasha Maggio, the mother of tanks and the host of the Why We Fight podcast. Sasha, welcome to the show. Hope you enjoy it.
You for having me.
Okay, and tell us about Why We Fight. I gather you think it's the world's largest something?
I'm pretty sure that it is the largest ever combined joint multinational military history effort. It started out with, it started out during, I started planning it during the pandemic. So I had just changed jobs and moved, and we had to work from home for most of the time. And to fill that time, I started, you know, chipping away at that hippie red pile, right? Because we've all got one. And I started doing research on the 1941 GHQ maneuvers, which are still the largest exercise that the U.S. Army has ever conducted. It was, I think, about a 500,000 men participating, and
Sorry, is that what's widely known as the Louisiana maneuvers?
so the Louisiana maneuvers were part of it.
Right.
But so it's like Louisiana maneuvers are part of the 1941 GHQ maneuvers, but not the entire thing. There were also the Carolina maneuvers. At some point before that, there were Tennessee maneuvers, which I think there's only one book on, and and then there were other maneuvers in other parts of the states. But the Louisiana maneuvers and the Carolina maneuvers in the fall are what we consider the 1941 GHQ maneuvers, which are the largest ever. And because I was working at Fort Leavenworth at the Mission Command Training Program, I thought, I could do this as like a Twitter series and just spend 3 weeks talking about these maneuvers and how they kind of are similar to what we do today. And when I pitched that to the commanding general at the time, it was General Rainey. He said he loved the idea. He put me in touch with his public affairs team, but they could only support 2 days a week. And so I spread it out throughout the year in 2021. And I talked about the changes to the U.S. Army in 1939 to 41, which were there's massive mobilization, modernization, mechanization that had been kind of building throughout the 30s anyway. And then I plan to culminate that series with the talk about the maneuvers and then end it with the uh, like the findings, the results. And but a couple of months, not even a couple of weeks into that, General Rainey wanted me to keep going after the maneuvers. He's like, keep going as long as you want, we'll support it. And so I took it to December of 41, talked about the attack on Pearl Harbor and you know, the official declarations that brought the US into the war. And then in January, I plan to pick it up in 1942 and just take it 1 year at a time. And that's when I changed it from building an American army to Why We Fight. In January, I also picked up the Marine Corps Museum, or the National Museum of the United States Marine Corps, which is their official title. Um, and they were doing threads on the Pacific, on the Marines in the Pacific. And when I say threads, I mean on Twitter, just a series of tweets that talk about the history. And and then for a while, the Land Warfare Center in the UK was also doing a part of the series as well. And so it's all written content at this point, though. And when I started the series in 21, I thought that it would be nice to have a podcast, but I didn't have enough attention at the time to kind of like draw in quality guests. I didn't know who I could ask. My network of historians wasn't as big as it could be, and so I at this point it was still just written content for those first 2 years. And in January of 2023, I decided I was going to add a podcast
If
in
I can interrupt
conjunction.
for a second, I would say that. Sorry, I'd just say one of the defining characteristics of your series is the quality of the guests. I just look on with incredible envy at the people you've managed to get in to talk to you. Obviously you timed it right, but you really do get some quite sensational people on.
Thank you. I feel like um, I feel like by adding the podcast, I was able to make the series what I closer to what I envisioned it would be. I knew that there was room to expand it. When I started doing, when I brought in the Marine Corps Museum and the Land Warfare Center in 2022, I knew, okay, so we've got, some Brits in there, we've got some Marine Corps in the Pacific in there, and I'm still covering, what we're doing throughout 1942 as far as the Army and the Air Force were concerned. Um, but then by adding the podcast, I knew we could expand it. But when I started, I had planned for 24 episodes. I thought two a month. I'll still be doing two threads per week on Twitter. And I just picked 24 topics from my list from my plan for the year. And I reached out to some friends and I was like, let's see who we can find to do these topics. But the enthusiasm that I got was more than I expected. And so I had people coming to me going, well, what about these people? They could talk about this. And what about this person? They could talk about this and this. And I I was like, all right, forget my plan. What do you want to talk about? What do you know? What can you add to this? My only stipulation was that it has to be anchored somewhere in 1943 because it was, that was where I was in the series. And it's my dog Pixel.
That's all right.
he
He's
just
a
he
kitty.
just hopped up and he was like, let me participate. Yeah, so
We've
that was
we've
my
had
only stip.
cats and dogs and yeah.
We're all for
Go
it.
on.
Yeah, so I said any back history, future implications, I'm fine with it. Just it's got to be anchored somewhere at 43. And I ended up with 108 episodes. So yeah, planned for 24, I ended up with 108. I still had seven that didn't make it. I had to move them to what I call bonus content. And so at the end of the 43 series, I added a Patreon page. I added the Patreon page. It's got one full episode. It's got one bonus episode, and it's got a lot of outtakes from the because I was editing so much and just tossing it. But there's a lot of parts in there that are funny or interesting that just didn't add to the topic of the episode that I was editing. And I was just throwing it away. And so I decided I'll just make those outtakes and bonus episodes. I still have seven or eight episodes that I need to edit that go on the Patreon page because they're just not I can't fit them into the regular series. But this year it's been all 44 and because of my because of the challenges I'm facing with my regular job, being very busy this summer, I'm behind in editing. So I still have like at this point that we're recording, I still have uh, seven or eight episodes that I wanted to get out in June, and we're in October. So, and then I've got probably 35 episodes that have been recorded that I need to edit, counting those. And I'm hoping to get most of them done by the middle of December so that I can at least start the Battle of the Bulge part of the series on time.
It seems like when you're looking at it as a finite war and you're saying, well, I've only got from 43 to 45 to go, but the way you're going with the episodes, that might still take a number of years for you. So I think you've got plenty of work to do there, and we really appreciate that you're putting the effort in and getting all these people together and to talk about it. So when do you think you actually get to 44?
44.
Oh, sorry.
35.
Yeah.
Um, I I'm hoping to start 45 on time. So the episodes that I'm recording now are all 44 episodes. I hit a snag where, and this is my perpetual problem, right? I planned for 5 or 6 episodes for Normandy because I didn't feel like it was necessary for me to cover it in depth because so many others like Paul Woodage with World War II TV and other platforms cover Normandy in depth. They cover D-Day and they cover Normandy and maybe they even cover the breakout. But I didn't feel like it was necessary for me to do that, and I ended up with 20 episodes for Normandy, and that's you know. So this is my problem. I don't stay as long as it's relevant, people pitch me really good ideas, and I'm not gonna say no if I feel like it adds to the story. And that's another part of what I was doing is that when we, especially Americans, we only learn like the highlights, right? That we learn about Pearl Harbor, we learn about D-Day, we learn about the Battle of the Bulge in school. We learn about the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but we don't really learn about how the war actually progressed, and we don't learn it in depth unless we learn it very deliberately. And I felt like we needed something like this. We needed to see that it's not an American story. It's a global story. It is not, you can't tell the American part of it, not understand what the Brits and the Australians and the New Zealanders and the Indians and the Canadians and everybody else were doing. And so I have been trying, and I mean, I am a one man show, right? But I've been trying to include as much of this as possible. And I like to tell people that we made this history together. We should be telling it together. So.
Yeah, I would say with, just because someone else has done a subject doesn't mean your audience doesn't want to hear you do that subject. So certainly sounds like having turned D-Day into 20 episodes, you've just led into that. But just a quick question: where does the name Mother of Tanks come from?
Sure. I think it was 2018, 19, and a U.S. Army Public Affairs officer jokingly called me that in a reply to something on Twitter. And I had been on Twitter for a long time, over a decade at that point. I had worked in content and marketing, content development, marketing and content development for over a decade. And when you do that, you have to be on every platform so that you can share your work. And and I was like, I wonder if there's a Mother Tanks account already, and there wasn't. And so I made one, and I just kept it private for a while, and I just let my friends know that I had done that. And then I reached a point where I was like, I'm just going to change to this account, and I deleted my old one. And so that's my only Twitter account now. But I after creating this series, I started to branch the Mother of Tanks brand out to the other platforms. So I'm with that name. I'm also on Instagram. I'm on Threads. I'm on Facebook, and yeah. So people can find me everywhere.
Nice one. Now, before we let you go, we do need to ask our obligatory guest question of what is your favorite tank?
I know time I say this, somebody goes, really? No. I like the Pershing, the M26 Pershing.
Ooh.
So
The
I
medium that
know
was a heavy, that was a tank destroyer, that was a heavy again, whichever way we went. At least it made it to the front lines.
it did only at the end of the war, and I
Hmm.
understand that we didn't really think we needed it. There was a lot of bickering in the War Department at the time over whether or not we needed it. Why are we wasting resources on this? Um, and it only saw a little bit of action in 1945. It came in just at the end of the war, really, just the last few months. And but I feel like it had potential, and I'm one of those. I'm a little idealistic, it's like I absolutely love the Army, right? I love the Army, but I love the Army for everything that it could be, and I love this tank for everything that it could have done. But I mean, it was helpful in Korea. It absolutely crushed some of the T-34-85s. It did I get that right? Yeah,
Yeah.
T-34-85s. And I just know that when we started that war in 1950, well, we didn't start it. When that war began and we were in it, the just trying to using the little chaffies and just getting kind of annihilated by the North Koreans and in these Soviet tanks that getting the Pershing there with the 90 millimeter gun and being able to crush them, that's, to me, that's like, I don't know how to word it. I'm all for, like, saving the little guy. I'm that's how I am. It's probably my innate American, idealism. But yeah, I like the Pershing for that reason, because I saw it as something that came in and tried to save the little guy.
Fair enough. And so you're in 1944 now with your series, which from an American point of view was probably the best year of the war. And you've got 45 coming up. Are you going to keep rolling into later conflicts, get into Korea, maybe into Vietnam at some point?
Yeah, I actually think that really important that we do a post World War II series. I think that we need to understand what happens when we actually fight a war like of this scale to completion and victory. I There's a lot of responsibility that comes with winning, and I think that we don't we don't have a real appreciation for what that actually entails, because this type of war is so different to what our people have been accustomed to for the last 20 or 30 years. And so I want to talk about the occupation, and I want to talk about rebuilding and the Marshall Plan, and the shifting geopolitics, and how we go from having the Soviet Union be part of the Allies to starting the Cold War. And then we can go into a Cold War series, and then there's room for things like Korea and Vietnam, and later. I feel like it would make sense to shift from this World War II focus to a NATO focus. But I also feel like that if I had just done with NATO focus, it wouldn't have had the same appeal if we don't have the back history going into it, because we need to understand why these things are important. A lot of Americans don't. We don't learn this history very well, like I said, unless we learn it very deliberately.
Yeah, I don't think America's alone in that. Certainly,
Well,
the historic.
I wasn't gonna say anything, but
Yeah, and even I mean the British focus on their history more, but even then it's a very narrow Britain hurrah version of history,
yeah,
and they gloss over quite important stuff that didn't go their way. Yeah,
that's what I mean, is that we focus, the Americans tell the American story, right? The Brits tell the British story. The Canadians tell the Canadian story. The Americans aren't telling the Canadian story, but the Canadians were right there with us the entire time. Longer, actually. And it's like, if
I
we
didn't want to
don't,
say that, but yeah.
yeah, longer, actually. It's like, there are some people that don't understand that, World War II didn't start on 7 December 1941. It started years before that. And technically, if you count the Pacific, it started years and years before that. And this is like
Mm.
this lack of understanding and the inability to appreciate the connection between these events, and how long the timeline was, and how everything is interwoven and interconnected and impacting the resources we were sending to the Pacific. That was stuff that wasn't going to North Africa or to Europe or to the home front. The resources that we were providing through things like Lend Lease to keep the Allies in the war until up until we get there, and then even then after that, um, it's like we need a better appreciation for this. And because we don't learn this history very well, it's really hard. And we've all got these knowledge gaps. Even I mean, there are things that I'm learning as I do this series in depth for the first time. And I just I wanted to create a way of sharing the history that wasn't overly serious or overly complex to the point that it put off people that don't normally like history content. And that's my favorite compliment, is people that tell me they don't normally enjoy history at all. They didn't like it in school. They don't seek out documentaries. They never turn on the History Channel. They don't like that stuff, but they like what I'm doing. And so it's I feel like that's a decent compliment. And I think that that's probably why I've attracted the guests that I get. So hopefully that
Nice
continues.
one. Rob, you got any more questions?
No, thank you very much, Sasha. That's been really useful, and I really appreciate your talking to us today. Now, what besides Mother of Tanks, do we look for you on any other under any other names, or Why We Fight, or what? How would you like to plug your sites and podcasts?
So I am on just about every platform. You can find me at either Mother of Tanks or under Sacha Maggio or S Maggio. I do have a website, motheroftanks.com, and there are links there to all of my social media. But yeah, I mean, I'm not hiding. So I do post the podcast. I do post the podcast episodes on every platform. Mostly, I do on LinkedIn under my own name, on Facebook under my Mother of Tanks page, Instagram under Mother of Tanks. But I also have a Sash Maggio one on Instagram, and then on Threads, which is like the Instagram answer to Twitter, and on Twitter. So.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you all the best with your project.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sasha.
I really enjoyed this.
Lovely. Thank you.